Hey, bestie.
What's up, girl?
Hey, does anyone ever ask you, like, oh, I heard you do a podcast. What's that witty and gritty podcast all about?
Yeah, okay, so I usually spit out this robotic sentence that's, we help hardworking Christian women get the growth they want by giving them the tools they need in order to have more joyful and fulfilling lives. So that's usually what I say, but I'm also monotone. Y'all know this. And so it's just like, wah, wah, wah. So Farron, what does that mean?
Yes, well, my response is not as fancy, even though I've heard you say that. Lots of times I should know by now. But essentially, I explain that we help people grow in their Christian lives, and through their growth, then they can better fulfill God's calling on their life.
Right, so we're book study experts, and we know how to analyze, pull apart, and take that through the Christian lens, and that's kind of what we do here.
And so then sometimes people are like, yeah, your self-help books, and they might be mainstream, but we are always sure to bring it back to God and the biblical view.
Right, so whether you see a secular book or something that a Christian author's written, just know that when you come here, you're going to get it through a biblical lens.
And not just ours. I like that we incorporate interviews by people living out the principles.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So that's your little bonus if you stick around through the series, which we hope you will.
Yay! Here we go!
All right, episode 171 of the How to Win Friends and Influence People in the Digital Age. And we have our closer today for the interview portion, which is your favorite, right, Farron?
Oh, yes. So you guys know we review books and review them through a biblical lens and say, how does that work when we're talking about our journey with God? But the interview, you get a break from listening to us and our experiences.
It's enough monotone.
Oh, yeah, say it with a smile. But we bring in the real life peoples, the human beings, to share that are living out the principles of the book. And so today we have a very special guest. They're all special, but of course, this one
we can have favorites,
special.
Right?
Yeah.
Favoritism isn't Bible at all. Right, so today we have Shelby Houston. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Shelby, and I am a junior at Dallas Baptist University, but I live here in Forney, Texas, and I attend Sea Life. I have interned there for about 2 years, but I have a super fun family. I have a mom and a younger sister and a younger brother, but yeah, I just am kind of traveling and getting to speak and write a book right now, so it's super fun.
So for those of you who don't know Shelby, just not every junior in college travels and speaks and writes books and things. So again, this whole mini series has been about taking what you know and what you've learned and how you're leveraging it to positively impact people around you, which is exactly what you're doing in your circumstance.
Yeah, so on December 3rd, I was at DBU. I was having class that morning, and I was kind of running around doing errands, doing some homework, and I got a text from Pastor Jeremy Fisher at Sea Life. It's like another dad to me, and he was asking if I was at home or at DBU. Thought it was an odd question. I didn't get a response, and so I kind of just went on with my day until I got the same text from my mom, and I was really confused, knew something was going on, and so I hurried up, called her, and she just kind of hid behind like a fake positivity, trying to move past it, and just kind of said that she had a priority. She needed me to get back to campus. And so I rushed back to DBU and hit a ton of traffic. I was like 45 minutes away. And I had no idea what was going on. And I just remember feeling so anxious that I was just crying. And it just kind of felt like everyone in the world was tapping on their brakes, and I was making wrong turns, and it was terrible. Finally got to DBU and called my mom. And at this point I was really angry because I didn't know what was going on. And I just remember telling her, like, tell me, what is it? What's going on? And she told me, your dad was in an accident today. And unfortunately, I've heard that before with him being in law enforcement. And so my mind did not jump to anything terrible or life-altering. And I said, okay, well, where is he? What happened? And that's whenever she told me he's not here anymore. And I just remember like the instant pain that flooded my body, just instantly. I screamed and I cried. It was like inhumane, but I didn't know what to do or what to say. And I was alone in this parking lot in my car, and I didn't have anyone near me. And so finally she somehow got across to me that Pastor Jeremy and his wife are on their way to get me. And so finally I got in the car with them and drove home, and terrible traffic. It had a thunderstorm that night. And so I remember pulling up to our street and seeing just a ton of police cars just down the road. Seemed like there were dozens of them. And so we pulled up. And actually in the car, I didn't know what happened to my dad. It just didn't occur to me to ask, I guess. And so while I was on the way home, that's whenever I pulled out my phone, and I'd come across an article that said that my dad had been shot. And he had responded to a disturbance call at work in Mesquite. And he was at a grocery store and came up to the scene. It was real calm, just a little argument, and it turned not so calm in like about a minute whenever a man by the name of Jaime Jaramillo turned around and shot my dad 3 times, and he was killed instantly. So since then, I ended up speaking at his funeral, and that's where I had my eulogy that kind of went everywhere, and that was just kind of the beginning of this really long journey. But I've been blessed by just all the opportunities that the Lord's given me. But I miss my dad a lot. So, but it's been a hard process, but I've just been grateful for the way that the Lord's come through. So.
Well, we're just thankful that you're even willing to share the story. So many people will either hide behind it or not leverage it for the glory of God, right? So you're taking those steps and doing that. So what were you going to say?
Yes, so we appreciate you sharing your story. I'm sure that every time you share it, it's still pretty painful. Mm-hmm. And in light of the book, we know that with both good times and bad, right, we're influencing mm-hmm. people. And we just admired your story because I think, I'll speak for myself, I don't know that I could be responding to the hurt in the way that you are, but I'll aspire to be like you. We just found that really special and unique because whether we like it or not, we are influencing people around us in our actions. So to be aware of that is really key.
There are a couple points I want to bring on. So you're a junior. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, age, she's so young. How no one responds this maturely. Well, actually, age is just a number. We all know this. And it really, in RCG lately, we've been talking about you've been a believer for how long, but a follower for how long. So yes, you've crossed the line of faith, but like how intentionally are you pursuing that relationship? Right. So you clearly are, it's easy to see that you are actively following Christ because it was not easier. That's not the right word, but it was just a simple decision. It was either this or this. It wasn't this whole complicated, I've got all these things going on. It was, no, this is the right answer, and I'm going to let my emotions catch up later.
Right. Yes.
Really fascinating. So I want to talk about one of the parts in your story about how the not knowing anything, like you get the call from your mom to drive back to campus. So in those moments of the not knowing, because there are people who listen to our podcast who are in the middle of we don't know why this is happening, or we're not even exactly sure what's going on, or they're not privy to all the information. So do you have any advice for what to do in those moments, or what worked for you?
Yeah, I knew on the way home that there was going to be some news, regardless of if I liked it or not. I didn't know what news yet, but I knew that it was going to be painful. I knew that it was going to be, life-altering, just because of the circumstance. I knew my mom well enough to know that this was serious. And so on the way home, I just began creating all these scenarios of what was going on. And it was through, after some tears, and getting really mad and angry. And that's something that I think can kind of be misconstrued about this story is that I was never angry or upset or any of those things, which is so far from the truth. Like, I think, first of all, it's important to be honest about how you're feeling. And I think that's why my story has kind of caught people a little off guard, is because I'm kind of an open book about this. I don't hide anything about it. And I think just the reaction of a lot of people have come from what it's like to be vulnerable. And so that's a huge topic that has just been on my heart for a long time. And, you know, for someone who may be walking through some difficulty or doesn't have the answers, maybe you'll never have the answers. I think in that moment, I knew that Jesus honors the truth, and that means being true and honest about your feelings. And just to recognize the fact that, even here, even when I am mad, even when I am heartbroken, he still sits with me and weeps with me and understands. I think that was huge for me. And so I think just knowing the attributes of God like that, it's easy to know those things, but it's different to believe those things. And so I think the biggest thing I would say to someone who's kind of walking through a valley, doesn't have the answers, would probably be not to just know those things about God, but to believe them. And that starts with being honest about where you're at and what you feel.
Such wisdom. I love it. I love it. One of the questions, so you mentioned being angry, and that could look a million different ways on because there's misguided anger where you're mad at your mom, or there's direct anger where you're mad at the person who has done this to your dad, or you're angry at God. So how did you ever feel towards God? Was there like anger towards him? Like, why did this happen? Or anything?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say, at least not yet, I don't think I've really ever felt anger towards God, or I know it's probably going to happen soon in grief, but I think there was just some anger about the circumstance, like why did it happen in the first place? And honestly, there's been moments of kind of asking, like, God, where are you? And even in that honest question, where maybe some anger is behind it, it's never stayed angry. And so just in the midst of conversation and just quiet time with him, it may start off like, man, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm upset, but I never leave that way. And so that's just been, once again, just a character of God. Just being able to redeem those small moments of, I know that you're mad and you have every right to be mad, but God, and, fill in the blank. So definitely have felt angry, not necessarily at God yet, just because of kind of the denial that I'm still in, but definitely angry at the circumstance.
We've had a discussion similar to this topic in CG recently as well about, when I went through a hard season a few years ago, that I'm on the other side of it. So I could tell you with the looking back perspective, and people will say, man, you must be strong in your faith. And I admit that there were times that I was angry and with God, but then someone in the group shed light on, it's not necessarily a lack of faith, that kind of discussion, because you're still taking that anger to God. You're still meeting with him there. And I love what you said, you approach that time with God, maybe not in the best, happy-go-lucky state, but you didn't necessarily walk away with all your questions answered, but that kind of unexplicable peace.
Yes.
So that really resonated with me when you just shared that piece. So thank you.
And multiple things are happening here. So number one, you're still meeting with God. So if you are struggling, whoever's out there listening, still meet with God. He can handle your big girl feelings. It's fine.
Yes.
also make the decision to never leave that conversation still feeling that negative emotion. So Ephesians 4:26, that's mine and my middle child's verse that we practice because it resonates. It's be angry and do not sin.
Yes.
Don't go down on your anger. So yeah, the Bible is very clear. Like, anger is going to be felt. Jesus felt anger. Anger is normal, but it's what we're doing after that. And like you were saying, Farron, too, you're still taking your feelings to God. You're still keeping the relationship going. But I like that add on there, Shelby, that you don't leave angry, which I think is
right. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So did you have a defining moment when you chose to show God's love and forgiveness versus holding a grudge and hatred? So in your eulogy that went viral, and we'll link it for people who haven't seen it, there is a specific part where you talk about you just want this guy to know Jesus. So what was going on in your head to make you want to say that, or even say it because you know that's right and your emotions will catch up later? Because before maybe our emotions catch up.
And just kind of a follow-up to that, because I don't know if you've had time in the whirlwind of everything to really step back and look, but if people saw you again at the eulogy deliverance phase of processing, which it's an ongoing process, obviously, they might not know what led to the moment that did go viral. So if you could shed some light on how you got to that point, whether it was instant or the process leading up to giving the eulogy.
Right.
Yeah. So my dad passed away on December 3rd, and then his funeral was on the 9th. And so we had about a week to prepare, which I am not familiar. That was really only the second or third time that I had really dealt with loss or death. And so with it being my own dad, I was like, I have no idea what we're doing, or like, how do you even prepare for this, you know? And so I was actually just so busy that week, which was kind of helpful. It was never like I really didn't have any day that week to just sit. And so I was helping my mom. We were at a ton of meetings, and because he was killed in the line of duty, this funeral was much more extensive than just a regular one. And so we just had a ton to do, and I didn't want my mom to walk through a lot of that alone. And so I just made an effort to be at everything, to take some stuff off of her plate. We had to contact family members and all of that. And so I really didn't have any time to sit down and write the eulogy until the night before. And so I just remember sitting at the kitchen table, and I just started writing. And I think I knew right away whenever I heard how he had died, and that there was another man involved in this, and his family, they were going to be a part of my life, whether I liked it or not. And so I think I knew really early on, just kind of the heart that Jesus would have behind this. And I actually had dealt with, just my whole life, I have really struggled with the death penalty, and men who have chosen, or women who have chosen to, murder somebody. They've always kind of been really close to my heart. I never understood why. But I mean, this was probably 2 years ago. I was watching the Ted Bundy tapes on Netflix, and it got to a point where whenever they had executed Ted, I just saw this whole group of people who were just waiting for this execution, and just like the joy that they had that he was dead, and just the cheering. And I remember watching that and just being like brought to tears, and I couldn't stop. But it was also something that I was like, why am I so passionate about this? Like, at this point in my life, like, nothing has happened to, bring this amount of like sadness about this topic. And so I had a bunch of conversations with my mom and my dad about this, and how I just didn't understand why I felt this way, until this happened on December 3rd. And it just shows just how the Lord has prepared my heart and my life for this. And so it was brought to mind whenever I sat down, and I knew, I felt this way for a reason. And I wasn't crazy. I it all started to make a little bit of sense. And I knew this was no different. than those instances. And so, you know, I made the decision really early on that I was going to forgive him. You know, a lot of people think, well, you were in the midst of a lot of grief. Like, you didn't have your mind right. Like, you were in denial. But literally almost 6 months later, here I am. And, you know, 6 months closer to getting to see Jaime. And it was just put on my heart immediately. Like, the Lord has power to save this man's life. And so I made that decision really early on that I wasn't going to hold on to hate, because I knew ultimately it had nothing to do with him, but more to do with my life and my heart. And I knew that it was just going to make this process so much harder if I had to hold on to that. And so it's kind of funny now looking back on my eulogy, because it's so not me. Like, it's so Jesus. And so it's funny, we laugh about it, because I'm like, I don't know how I did that. I don't know how that went.
The Holy
viral.
Spirit actually was speaking through you.
Yes.
Shelby turned off.
No, really. Yes. So, but yeah, it was totally Jesus. And because I really, like I said, I didn't do anything to prepare for that. I sat down the night before and then got up and said it. And it is true of my heart and what I believe, but it was totally carried by God. So
I love how that God, you just being able to recognize, and we can all recognize this in whatever life phase we're in, that you are being prepared along the way. You are being equipped. The Bible talks about how he's going to equip us for whatever's going to happen. So it's really neat to see that you had the wherewithal to see that happening. And then as you're having those conversations with God, this event happens, and then now I get it, the light comes on. So if we can all just be more aware, and then that also takes being actively preparing instead of just sitting and waiting for something to happen, and I haven't read my Bible, or I haven't been in home group or whatever, and then now something's happening. Oh no, now I'm treading water instead of the lifeboat's right here with everybody in it. Let me get in.
We talk about that a lot. Like, you know, if you do find yourself in the middle of a tragedy, we're not saying don't turn to God. What we're saying is, are you putting in the work before those things occur? It doesn't change the outcome, but it can sure do a lot for your spirit. And Shelby had the opportunity to speak at our women's conference,
which is so awesome.
What?
Our women's conference. And then when I knew you were going to be one of the speakers, we're like, we gotta talk to her.
Oh yeah,
she's willing to speak, so maybe she'll be on a podcast.
Yes.
I don't remember the exact scripture verses, and I don't expect you to remember them either, but the story about, is it Paul when he gets bit by the viper?
Yes, shipwrecked on Malta.
Yes. See,
I'd be so mad.
Well, okay, so the takeaway that I had, just knowing your story and hearing, knowing what I know from the eulogy, that story, and what you shared that night, I thought that illustrated, like, what do you do when the viper bites you? Because that kind of sucks. If I get bit by a viper,
I'll be mad.
I'm not going to be like Paul, and I'm going to be like, someone suck the venom out. Is that even what you do? I don't even for you. But you're going to see a lot of panic and like, my life is over. But that the other people that observed this saw his reaction to that moment and knew that the Lord had to be with him, because any normal person would have acted completely different. And so, again, you sharing that from the Bible in light of your story, you picked a good one. I don't know if you need me to tell you that, but
good job, Shelby. You're great.
Turns out you're good at what you do. But I don't remember that story from the Bible, but now I won't ever forget it. You know?
It's cool to hear it a different way, different context. So what advice, let's say we're stuck. This thing has happened to us and we're stuck, and we want to have this change of heart. We want to forgive this person, but we're hitting that hurdle and we can't get over it. What advice would you have for us then?
So mine was, I think, just staying close to Jesus, honestly, and staying in his word, and not ever letting anything around me pull me away from that. And that includes my friend group, that includes the things that I listen to, the music that I have on, what's going into my body, my ears, and and then taking care of myself, all of those things for sure. But I think for me, I knew, like I said, immediately, because I just pictured just the face of Jesus, and honestly looking into the eyes of Jesus, and like the kind of suffering eyes. I think that was the biggest thing for me. And I know we've all probably seen those eyes in our friends and our family and those we love, of, when they've suffered or whenever they've hurt. And so just kind of, I think, having a moment with Jesus and looking into those eyes of suffering, and just knowing, like, this is why he hung on the cross. It was for me, but it was for Jaime too. And that was never lost on me. And so that's kind of what fueled that decision, was just knowing that the Savior of the world hung on a cross and died. But whenever we say that, I think we just kind of skip over the part, like, he suffered. Like, it was painful. And I think it's just kind of been lost on us. I know I've been guilty of just, like, he was human in flesh that felt pain, that suffered long. And yes, he rose again, praise God, but there was a moment, like, he suffered. And so I think that's just what captivated my heart to make this decision. And so for those who maybe are walking in the same shoes, or have just kind of walked through loss or pain or confusion, I would encourage you to just sit with him and look into his eyes, and just remember the cross. That's just been huge for me, and not just remembering it, but believing in it. So
everybody go back and rewind 3 minutes and listen to that again. That's really all you need, guys.
I love that you talked about what you're consuming, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm just having this thought here that, like, influencers, people that have an influence on others, not just the social media and Instagram feeds, but someone who is in a place of influence is also influenced by other things. Yep. And we speak a lot to moms, and you're a junior in college. What influences kept you close, kept you growing closer to God and Jesus, especially like middle school, high school, and the big leap when you're going out on your own to college? Maybe it was people, maybe it was resources. Again, it could be your spiritual maturity that you created these habits to continue to grow closer to God. But can you elaborate more on that even before this instance? Because you shared after, and maybe the answer is the same. But
yeah, during middle school and high school. So I came to know Jesus when I was 7, and my dad was able to walk me through salvation, and so that's been really special to remember. But I always grew up in church, and in middle school is whenever I found out about this youth group. And I had some friends in middle school. I played volleyball since I was really young, so I always had a team of people. But outside of that, I didn't have a whole lot else. And so I decided to go to Sea Life Momentum whenever I was a 7th grader. And since then, like, that place has just been my home. And so I would encourage, like, parents, moms, like, take your kids to church, and not only take them to church, but enjoy it with them. Like, I think, or at least I've seen some families who they'll go, but then whenever you get home, it's like kind of a lost cause. But, like, I think from the very beginning, it was never like, okay, let's sit down and talk about Jesus. Like, it was just always part of life, and in and out of the house and school. And so that was huge for me. And I knew Jesus whenever I was 7, but I loved Jesus whenever I got into middle school and was a part of Sea Life Youth. And so I grew up there, graduated in Sea Life Youth, and even came back to intern for the youth. And so I think whenever I moved out and it was kind of up to me, I was about an hour and a half away. I was playing volleyball out of college in East Texas. I had to make a decision to find a new church, find a home church for where I was. And so I found a really good one that was similar to the one at home. And so I went, and just first thing I said, I was like, I need to get plugged in. So that means I serve wherever that means. And so I ended up serving with our young adults team there. And so it was almost to a point where I had some form of church or ministry or time with Jesus every single day. And that's still true here. I go to DBU. And so, and my schedule was busy, but I squeezed it in. I made it work. And so that was me during middle school, high school, college, before any of this even happened. But I had to make the choice to put in the work. And that means, maybe I'm tired, but I was just constantly surrounded by people who loved Jesus and who wanted the best for me. And then even in my work, I was, doing ministry but still being fed by other ministries. So the Porch Young Adults Ministry in Dallas, it's not my church, but I'm still a part of it. And so I think that's just the most important, yes, you do want to give, you do want to serve, and it is the most life-fulfilling thing. But it's also important to take care of yourself and, to be fed by other ministries or your school or your friend group. And so, yeah, I was a busy girl growing up, but I think it's just made me into who I am today. So
everybody go back 3 minutes and listen to this again. If you need advice as a parent, a kid, whoever, it's applicable for everyone. And we've, again, lately in our CG, we've talked about how you're having the higher up popular preachers or whoever, they surrounded themselves with people who are going to help keep them in line, keep them on track, call them out whenever it needs to be happening. And that's what our CG does for each other. Like, if you see me stumbling, you better pick me up before I actually go. Be in my life. So it's really cool that you, again, the wherewithal to know to do that even as a young adult. We were college athletes as well, so we totally get we're so busy lifestyle, but you have to make time for the things that are most important, even if that is you're tired. The trade-off is later on the roots.
The roots run deep. Yes.
Okay. So this is more practical application for people and making them get in the word. So do you have any specific verses that you either have on repeat for you or that resonate with you? You mentioned the Paul with the viper. Is there anything else that really sticks out to you or is carrying you through this season?
I think, there's so many, and it's not one that has just been on repeat. But like I said, that story resonates with me. Honestly, I feel like my life is Job, the book of Job. I love that story of the Bible, that whole book. And so I think probably just the biggest image that I have, or at least what I want to look like, is just the story of Job, like everything being taken from him, but just falling on his knees in worship. And so that's probably the biggest, I guess, image, or not necessarily image, but just who I want to be. And so that book of Job, it has a ton of super heartbreaking stories, but just seeing the Lord choose him and trust him, that's kind of just what's kind of carried me. And then of course, he will turn mourning into dancing, and he will wipe every tear away. And those are all promises that I've clung to. But yeah, so.
I love that. They, again, get to hear from us. They, the audience, get to hear from us all the time. If somebody knows they ought to, or they want to start reading their Bible, but they're really intimidated, and this is just your Shelby opinion and advice, no wrong answers. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start, but they don't know where to start, and it just seems like too much?
Yeah, so there's a ton of options that you could probably find online. You can find books, and, you know, I have been guilty of buying all the books that's like, you want to read the Bible in 365 days. Here you go. And I'll get it, and I just won't do it.
It's always through January.
Yes. Yeah, I'm like still stuck in January, and it's like, I'll start next year. So that happens all the time. So first of all, for any of you who feel that way, I want you to know it's totally normal. You're not alone. Probably everyone and their mom has done the same thing. But for me, it's been really helpful. Actually, I have it right here. It's called an illustrating Bible, and it's huge, but it basically has like a ton of room to write on the outsides and really just make room to study it. I love the, what is it called? Bible in a Year, Bible Recap by Lisa
Tara-Leigh Cobble.
Yeah, Tara-Leigh Cobble, yes.
I got you, girl.
And so, yes, I love that book. That's been really helpful for me. But honestly, like, I just start with stories of the Bible. And you could probably look it up, and it would give you a ton, and it would tell you where it is in the Bible to start reading. But that's how I love to read it. You can read it from front to back, but I see a lot of his character whenever I go to a certain story, and it's fun. You know, there's some books of the Bible that you'll probably read and be like, oh, it's just the family ancestry, like that. And it's important to read those too. But for those who want to start, I'd say to jump into just a story. So Job is a great place to start.
Lots of fun, guys. Come with me. Yeah. There's a nagging wife and everything.
Yes.
I like how you mentioned, so not only just verses, I think a lot of people can sometimes just take a verse out of context, or they can only memorize one little chunk. But I like how you're tying it back to the story. So yes, if we quote the Ephesians 4:26 with the be angry and don't sin, what is the whole letter to the Ephesians about? Who is writing it? What's happening in the story? And the Bible is just one big story of God's love. So our brains operate in story. We like movies and books as humans and we live in a story. So it only makes sense to read a story or a chunk, not just one book, the chunk, the chapter, part of the book. What's in the book?
Right. Yeah. And I actually heard a pastor talk about, you know, there's so many stories of the Bible and everything that's in there. And I think sometimes we can learn a lot from the characters in the Bible. But, you know, part of me thinks like, you know, David and, you know, John and Peter, like they're all so influential, great guys. But, you know, I would have to think they're probably like, stop talking about me. Like, this is not about me. This is about Jesus. And of course, like, yes, they're used in stories and all the people in the Bible, but I think we have to realize, like, this book is not about them. This book is about Jesus. And so whenever we can take that out of context and try and fit yourself into it, like you should. I mean, this whole Bible is written to you, but it is not about you. It is about Jesus. So I think that's important for us to remember.
So Tara-Leigh Cobble, guys, her episode is episode 81. If you want to go back and listen to it, she talks about that whole resource and why she wrote it, because she was that person. She wanted to read the Bible, but didn't. So she made it a way that worked for her. So if y'all want to hear more about Tara-Leigh and her story, episode 81.
Yes. We are on the tail end of this interview, but our next question has to do with what are you doing now in light of the loss of your dad, but even the eulogy. I asked this from this perspective as well. I wonder if some people will see you at that eulogy and think like you've offered this forgiveness and, you know, grieving is a process, but they could almost have this misconception like all better and, you know, you're done, right? But those are probably also people that fortunately have not experienced the grieving process before. But what are you continuing to do in light of all the circumstances, but the loss of your dad, the eulogy going viral? How do you continue to grow in spite of the past?
Yeah. I think whenever the eulogy went viral, I was really caught off guard. I did not know that was going to happen, and it happened within seconds. And not only was I grieving, but now it was made really public. And that's just a whole different.
Now raise your hand if you like to cry in public.
Yes. And so I kind of had to adjust to that, which made it a little harder. But now just all the opportunities that I've been given because of that, I think was just the Lord saying, like, yeah, this platform is going to be hard, but look at all the things that you're going to get to do. And so I've gotten to travel a ton during this time. I took a semester off school just so I can, say yes to these things right now. But I'm in the middle of writing a book with the help of Bob Goff. And so he's been a great friend to me, and I've gotten to visit him. And he actually, I went with him to San Quentin State Prison in California. And so that was just a huge thing for me, just to be with those guys who have they're in the same shoes as Jaime. And just getting to hear their story and for them to hear mine, it just brought a lot of healing for me. And so it is possible to grieve and heal in the midst of having some really special moments and, not being upset. I'm kind of I process after things are over. And so just kind of being in there and knowing my goodness, I miss my dad. And these guys took the life of other people. But also getting to see the other side of who they've become kind of brought a lot of healing. Just seeing that it's possible and that the Lord really is who he says he is. I think that was just the proof and his faithfulness. And so that has been probably the biggest moment for me. But I've also gotten to travel and film, and I'm going to be a part of the SBC Southern Baptist Conference coming up in June. And so, yeah, it's been really fun. And I've had to kind of grieve on the go. But you'd be surprised how healing and processing this is for me. I think, like you said, a lot of people probably heard that and they were like, oh, she's all better. Not true. But in a way, it's just been the strength, the power, the promises, the faithfulness of Jesus that have kind of allowed me to do this stuff. So.
Well, and you're a living example of Philippians 3:14, which is you're pressing on. So grieve on the go, it equals pressing on. That's exactly what it is. I like that phrase. Grieve on the go, people. Let's go. We got to press on.
That's what they do. People.
Yeah, right. Okay, so actually, shout out Bob Goff. We did his Dream Big mini-series, episodes 92 through 100, and one of the chapters in there is specifically taking a genuine interest in others. So it was really cool that we did that book study, and then a few months later this happened, and now we know you're writing a book with Bob Goff, and I was like, he's living what he writes. I love it when authors do that. So he is taking a genuine interest and helping leverage that and providing a way because he's gone before you, so now he can look back and come along, which is now you will be doing. You're going before others, and now you can bring them along, which is really cool.
Talking about investing in other stories, like getting to visit that prison.
Mm-hmm.
That was really neat. I'm sure you're going to write more about it in your book, so we won't pepper you with questions yet.
But we will have you back on.
Yes.
Yes.
But like you said, you're grieving and healing and simultaneously. And so if you would have, not pressed on and stayed back and said, well, maybe I'm not supposed to take these opportunities now, what does society say I need to do?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just these moments that you would have missed out on and hearing and seeing the flip side. So more power to you for trusting in the Lord's way and not the world's way. So I love to see that. But you were going to say something else.
So I guess more about the book. Do you want to give us a little taste of what it's going to be about, or are you allowed to do that yet?
Oh yes, yeah. So I'm going to write. It's going to be just kind of about my story, obviously, but it's going to be a little bit of before the loss of my dad, during the loss of my dad, and then after. So that's kind of going to be like the bulk of the book. But it'll tell a lot of stories of just me and my dad, or just things that have happened now because of it and the experiences that I've had. So like I said, I've been super busy, so I haven't gotten to write a ton. But I'm also kind of in the beginning of my book because we haven't even gotten to trial. I haven't even gotten to see Jaime. So it's going to be a long process, but I'm kind of writing as I go. And so it'll just kind of give a lot of insight into, like I said, just the true feelings that I've had. Like I said, made that decision early on that I wasn't going to hide anything, because I think that's kind of what the world needs to see, that it's okay to share that you're upset. It's okay to share about loss, just because I feel like we have created this idea that you need to keep those things to yourself and don't tell anybody how you really feel. And but also just, showing people that maybe are walking through the same thing, or or just loss, pain, whatever it is, just getting to see how you can use that, and just, providing biblical scripture and backup for what the Lord has done. And I think, hopefully that a lot of lives will come to know Jesus for the first time, or maybe the next time, just because of this story. And so I'm excited to have Bob help me write it, because I don't know how to write a book. So he's been a lot of help.
He's got a few, so I think we're good.
Yes, yeah.
That's awesome. I want to circle back to one thing. Yeah, totally off topic. Well, not totally. You're using his first name. You're using Jaime's first name instead of the murder of my father. So yeah. I even like that little shift. It's a small shift, but it is making that person a human, because guess what? God loves that guy too.
Yeah.
Was it easy to make that switch, or?
Kind of like I said whenever I decided I was going to forgive this guy, I knew, okay, if I'm going to forgive this guy, he has a name, he has a life, he has purpose. And so, I would hate to be called by my sin and my shame and my guilt. And so, I know probably the whole world hates this guy. And I wasn't going to, be one of those. So, I made that decision early on to call him by his name. And it was actually cool to be in that state prison and getting to share this story with, there was probably 50 guys there listening. And whenever I said his name, it was like instantaneous, like the whole room just broke, because I think, a lot of them told me that they kind of felt humanized again. Like, they're not a number, they're not a murder case, they're not their sin, but, they have a name and they have a story. And that doesn't mean that, I applaud them or anything for what they've done, but I do see the purpose of Jesus in them. And so that's kind of what guided me to make that decision about him.
Yeah, we have a whole episode about using people's names. So
yes,
there you go.
Okay, great.
Okay, so where can people find more of Shelby Houston? And that way we can keep up with the book stuff and your speaking engagements and how we can find you and just see just your daily wisdom kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm on all the social medias. My Instagram is Shelby with 2 Y's, Houston with 2 N's, Shelby Houston. And then I actually, I have a website, www.shelbyhouston.org. And so on there is where I have a blog. And I'm going to post kind of all of the kind of speaking engagements that I've had. If they're filmed, like my sermon from Bloom, it's posted on there. And so that'll just kind of be where I'll do a lot of writing, kind of what you'd see in the book. But yeah, I'm on Facebook, Shelby Houston. And I love getting to hear from people, just maybe what they're walking through, what I can pray for. So never be afraid to, shoot me a DM or a text. My email's in there. So, and I live here in Forney. I go to Sea Life. So if you see me, I want to talk to you. That's kind of my thing, is during this time, there's been a lot of just the generosity of, so many people. I really haven't gotten to say thank you or, make conversation or friends throughout this. And so, that's my thing. I'd love to, be a part of other people's lives. So, you can find me on all of that stuff. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Shelby. We loved having you, and we look forward to having you again.
Yes. Thank you.
So we're really good at segues. And sound effects, right?
Yes, so that's the end of our episode. But if you find yourself wanting more, and who could blame you, Brooke, tell them where they can find us Monday through Friday.
We have a lovely website. It's wittyandgritty.blog. You can go there. It has every mini-series ever we've done. What about the socials, Farron?
Yes, we are on Instagram and Facebook primarily, but we do also have a Pinterest account, so be sure to follow us on your favorite social platform.
Yeah. Oh, also, fun fact, we release episodes every Wednesday, so you can count on us.
Be sure to subscribe. That way you don't have to go and find it every week.
Yeah, it'll just automatically do the magic computery thingy.
Thank you, technology.
Go
Thank you.
technologies and Instagrams.
Yes. All right, we'll catch you next week, guys. Bye.
This episode is brought to you by 21 Kicks Journals, the journals you'll actually finish.
Research shows that actively doing something for 21 days in a row will change your brain.
Our uniquely designed 21-day journals will grow you on a deeper level, help you increase your odds of achieving your goals, and, not to mention, they're fun and beautifully designed.
Head to the 21 Kicks Etsy shop today to explore your journaling options. We'll link it in the show notes.